Okay, well, now we're going to try to write a sonnet here. We're in my den here. Whoops, there goes the pencil. if you can see here, this is sort of like the factory here. I've got poems here. If you pan over, that are the folded ones are ones that have come back rejected. The other ones are ones to go out up there. And I was thinking of doing a local guy, or fairly local guy, Ed Gein, who was the inspiration for Psycho and also the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The first thing to do is to get sort of, if we want to take a baking metaphor, is to try to get the ingredients. And so we have to look up for the historical elements. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to go and get my encyclopedia, or a couple of books on killers, and look up a few facts of Ed Gein's life. So now what you do is, since I've got the basic facts of this guy's life, now we want to put them in some kind of order, something that's an in, and I still don't know what. So this is why I've got a sheet of lines that are interesting. So I'm going to scan through some of these lines, and maybe anywhere from 2 to 6 lines that might interest me. And I'm not necessarily looking for violent lines, since obviously anyone reading about Ed Gein and just the things that are going to appear are going to portray him as a violent, fiendish individual. So you want lines that are going to stick out, especially some that might stick out tangentially. Well, here's a phrase, a space and time, and that's from actually from a 10 Years After album from the early 70s, 10 Years After Alvin Lee. Instead of him doing something, just a moment, a snapshot, and how maybe Vermeer might have painted Gein. The uncaused moment, that's a Vermeer type phrase, the uncaused moment that is this period. And as the line shows, the period it's talking about is the period that ends that phrase. So I've got an idea now, just seeing that line, not only just trying to incorporate the visual element, but for the poem to acknowledge that it is a piece of art, that it uses things as periods, is interesting. So we want to get a picture of Gein, but now this gives me the idea that the third person speaking in the poem is going to be acknowledging that this is an artifice. The uncaused moment is the uncaused moment that is this period. Oh, perfect, 11 syllables. The uncaused moment that is this period. The uncaused moment that is this. So now, but if I'm going to directly, so I have to drop the period. The uncaused moment that is this comma, yeah, is a bough that for a moment stays. Thinking I'm not going to mention Gein in the poem. I'll have Gein in the title, which will be enough there, and it'll be anonymous. And that what that does too is it separates the title from the poem, and it makes them two equal partners that you have. If you read the poem separately, you're going to have one thing, and then the title adds another dimension. And since I want to acknowledge the artifice of the poem and the Vermeer-like dimension of looking at Gein, it gives a number of perspectival insights. So let's see, the uncaused moment that is this comma is the bough that for a moment sways, is the bough that for but a moment sways, and but with but a moment sways, because I've already acknowledged the comma, as only its motion relates the day. So that gives me the 10 syllables in that line. As only its motion relates the day. Instead of relating to the day, to relate the day is a more active, because you're taking the image of the swaying bough and it's grabbing hold of the day rather than just being in relation to the day. So the dropping of the to there is good, because the uncaused moment that is this comma is the bough. So the comma is the bough, and so while that's the visual element within the poem, the comma, the artifice of the literature of the poem, the words here, the technique, is what is the bough. And I'm thinking that's something, that's an abstraction. So that's why instead of beyond the bars, I was looking for a visual image, you know, that these bars or that this window infers. But I said, well, if I've got the comma here and the comma is the bough, then the bars perhaps on his gate can be the actual sonnet. And so now I'm thinking of making the actual poem form somehow the thing that hermetically seals in this person. I still haven't mentioned, you know, the murderous intent yet. At the mellifluous light of morning. And so I've got morning, I don't need that, and I had sways. So I'm going to use some variant of the line, the bough that for but a moment sways as with stays, and then morning with evening, and probably at the end of this quatrain here, or maybe not, maybe it'll be at the, because I'm thinking of going Baudelairean, 4-4-3-3 in terms of line structure now. Enters his eyes within. That's one of my favorite words. Don Moss thinks I obsess on within and without, but what the hell. Enters his eyes within this space in time. So I get Alvin Lee back in this space in time. And time is also a great word because there's so much that you can rhyme with it. Beyond, let's see, I got two beyonds. I'm going to lose one of them, but I'm just setting the first template here. As the mellifluous light of morning enters his eyes within the space and time, beyond that joy, undeterred by this rhyme, beyond that joy, undeterred by his rhyme. So now, already here in the first, halfway through basically the first draft here, I've already established that I'm too committed now with using the words in the poem like comma and sonnet, and I'm kind of liking the way this is going because I was a bit worried that I was going to do something that wasn't at least interesting. You know, I can, you know, it would be nice if I could just boom, 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 pop out a great sonnet, but already from the first time, just looking at the GEIN info, I've already gone far beyond what I thought. And now in the first 7 lines here, I've got the word comma, the word sonnet, and the word rhyme. So I've gotten the artifice of the poem well established within the rhetorical metaphor within here. The metric fallacy, I'll rail against that sometime. But by having a rhyme, you know, at the end of one line and the beginning of another line, just 2 lines down, it's something that almost is like a record skipping, and it psychically or psychologically implants in someone's mind that there's a slip somewhere, which is good because that's something that maybe a GEIN, you know, again going back to like a facial tic, this is something that just structurally implies a little bit off, something that's just not right, and we still haven't gotten into GEIN really here. Beyond that joy, undeterred by this rhyme, where he smiles, where he smiles, where he smiles, where he smiles in a way just seeming. So already I've got the first 2 quatrains here. So now I'm midway through, and I'm looking towards the ending here. So now what I'm doing here, because I don't have any in the first 8 lines, I don't have any excess rhyme. So now I'm thinking of the rhyme structure of the last 6 lines, and I'm not going to go 4-2. I don't want to do the Shakespearean because then that implies too much of a need for a bang, a sacco ending, you know, which generally tends to be moralizing, which I don't mind at times, but I'm going more for the 3-3 Baudelairean or Rilkean end here. So let's see. Where he smiles in a way just seeming to... Okay, because I had the line, smile as a hint of the skull, and here, where he smiles in a way just seeming. So I'm going to take a version of that line here. Beyond that joy, undeterred by this rhyme, where he smiles in a way just seeming to hint at the skull. To hint at a skull. To hint at a skull. His only joy. To hint at a skull. Only it relates. To hint at his skull. To hint at a skull. Which only relates. To hint at a skull. Which only relates. Which only relates to his past. To his past, which this poem, because I've got the piece on, to his past, which this poem, to his past, which this poem finds so distractive, to his past, this poem finds so distractive, unlike, because we have the line, is the bough for that for but a moment sways in the first quatrain. I'm going to put it in the first tercet here too, and that will be the end line summary there, so it's almost like the climax. Let's see, To hint at a skull which only relates to his past, this poem finds so distractive. Unlike that bough, unlike that bough, which for a moment stays, unlike that bough, which for a moment stays. So already I've committed now with this relates distractive and stays to usually they go, wait a minute, relates, stays, that's close enough. And now I'm looking here at things that I have left over that I haven't used, words like grabastic and smallness, music, and I have to still get in the last terse at mellifluous light of evening. Stays within, and here's probably my final use of the artifice here. Unlike that bough which for a moment stays within, I'm looking for something on the artifice of the poem here, which for a moment stays within, because I also had the word within up there. Unlike that bough which for a moment stays within, the poem stays within. Unlike that bough which for a moment stays within the rhythm, stays within its rhythm, within its rhythm, or its beginning to end, or its beginning to end. Okay. Within its rhythm or its beginning to end. Within its rhythm or its beginning to end. Okay. So I haven't used any really violent images of him, and I'm loath to do so. I'm probably going to refer to him somehow as a murderer, a monstrous in the title, and let that just play off against the poem. The poem has a very quiet, Vermeer-like feel so far, and I want to sort of keep that so that the title, in effect, almost acts like a pebble dropped into the still water. Now I'm trying to end it here. Now I want to get the phrase mellifluous light of evening to parallel the morning earlier, and I've got beginning, so that's why I use the word beginning, so that I get the almost near the rhyme of the ings there, the gerundas, and distractive is the middle sentence, or the middle line in the first terse set. So I'm looking to try to work in and then there was life, or maybe even grabastic in there, to get an off rhyme. I'm not committed to having total rhymes here. But let's see here. Let's try. Sometimes we'll just force it here, and then I'll polish it up later. Where he smiles in a way just seeming to hint at a skull which only relates to his past, this poem finds so distractive, unlike that bough which for a moment stays within its rhythm, or its beginning to end, period, and it ends. To end and it ends, and then there was life. 10 lines. And then there is life. See, I had and then there was life, but then there is life, because we don't want to be looking from the past here. That is this coming, because I've been in the present tense the whole poem, so it gives a very Genesis-like feel here, but I need to get the last line in here. So we got here, well, let's see, the first 13 lines. Let's see if I can get way to get the last line in, and then we can just polish it up a couple of times here. The uncaused moment that is this comma is within its rhythm, or its beginning to end, and it ends, and then there is life, the mellifluous light of evening, and then there is life, and let's see, and it ends, and then there is life, and the mellifluous light of evening, which gives a very painterly like port end. Okay, so and the mellifluous light of evening. Vermeer made his appearance in my mind midway through the poem. So now I've got, I don't know if I can hold this up here. Now I've got the whole, you won't be able to make it out because I write like chicken scratch. But okay, it's been what, about 40 minutes here. So I've got the first draft down here. And still the working title is just GEIN. But let me read the poem here, and I'll explain what the strengths are and the things that have to be tightened up here. So we've got GEIN. The uncaused moment that is this comma, comma, is the bough that for, comma, but, comma, a moment sways, as only its motion relates the day, beyond the bars that this sonnet infers, as the mellifluous light of morning inters his eyes within this space and time, beyond that joy undeterred by this rhyme, where he smiles in a way just seeming to hint at a skull which only relates to his past, this poem finds so distractive, unlike that bough which for a moment stays within its rhythm, or its beginning to end, period, and it ends, period, and then there is life, period, and the mellifluous light of evening. So we have the progression, especially, and it's odd. I rarely use rhetoricals, Whitman-like rhetoricals, and in a sonnet, but I think it works in this case because it gives a. I've had a couple of instances here with the slipped rhythm of inters and infers, and words like distractive that give a sense of him being a little off here, but then and it ends. So he's caught, he's in some kind of piece, and a word like and just the repetition of it, and gives a sort of, it gives a sort of rhythm that there's some kind of stasis coming to his life, and just the image of the mellifluous light of evening, he's getting older. So, you know, I've got the mellifluous light of evening parallel the mellifluous light of morning. I've got the bough swaying and then staying. So we've got motion in morning, and then we've got staying or a lack of movement in evening. So we get the sense of time, or something has come to us, getting more peaceful. I'm going to have to change one of the two beyonds. I'm going to have to drop. But now I'm thinking what the title is going to be, because now that I've got the initial outline of the sonnet, here's where the title might force some changes in word choices. Now I've simply got Ed GEIN. So let me see if I can get a title from any of his life story here. Ed GEIN becoming. Ed GEIN becoming a metaphor. Ed GEIN becoming, because that's an interesting title. Ed GEIN becoming, to be becoming, meaning to become respectable. Someone who's becoming is appealing, and here we're giving a more appealing portrait of GEIN, and also he's in the act of becoming something. In the sonnet, that he's becoming a metaphor, but he's also maybe becoming a peaceful human being. So I think I like that, because he's not really doing anything. We're commenting on him. So I think I like that idea. Ed GEIN becoming. Someone can fill something in, but also the word itself has many connotations. And I don't necessarily, I leave it up to the reader then to what they want to do. Whereas if I did like Ed GEIN in The Quiet Horrors, I'm imposing too much on someone. I think I'm gonna go again to Alvin Lee here. Inters his eyes within this space of time. This space of time. The word of, rather than, because in time is too binding. The space of time, we don't know how it relates to time. So that puts a sense of lostness too early in the poem. Just a relational lostness in the words that might imply early in the poem that GEIN is lost. So of here is a stronger word than in, and I have inter, within, and in. 3 times in a line is a little too much. 2 I can stand, but now I need to get rid of that second beyond in the 7th line here. As the mellifluous light of morning inters his eyes within the space of time, without that joy. Within this space of time, without that joy. In the space and time, comma, without. Don Moss is not going to like that, but I'm the hell with him, it's my poem. Without can be lacking, and also outside of. This space of time, if it's Ed GEIN becoming, we have to date this somehow after he has been caught. Early 60s. And also that relates too, because the 60s, quote unquote, a time of awakening. So maybe at the same time flower power and all that was coming in, Ed GEIN is having an insight. So Ed GEIN becoming, let's date this the year I was born, 1965. That'll give someone Ed GEIN becoming. So he's been in stir for about 8 years now. To hint at his skull. To hint at a skull. Which only relates to, no, it has to be a skull, because then it can be his skull, and it gives a hint of the darkness. So the only darkness we really got here in this poem is the skull. As far as the end rhymes, we have comma, infers, sways, day, they're off. They're not exact, and I like that. Morning seeming is close. Time rhyme is the only one that's really a direct rhyme here. And we've got relates, stays, and beginning, evening, and then we've got the middle lines of the two tercet, distractive and life. So it's close enough that you can get away with it and having one that doesn't really rhyme, but it has the I there and the E. That's fine. And what else would we have here? Just to point out, like I said, we have the swaying and the morning, and then we have the calm, the staying, and the evening, and both with mellifluous light. So we have coming together the and of the last three sentences gives, and in a sense, the use of the and almost is a grammatical recapitulation of the I's in the 12th line within its rhythm or its beginning, and so we have a sense that the poem here is using devices, and because we've acknowledged that we've acknowledged throughout that there's a comma sonnet poem, that it is an artifice. The first period really doesn't appear until the 13th line. I didn't want to put a comma, for example, after where he smiles in the 8th line, where he smiles, comma, in a way just seeming, because it wouldn't relate to the next line. It would be confusing. But here I added a comma, for example, unlike that bough which, comma, for a moment, comma, stays, comma, because it'll connect well to the next line within its rhythm. But also, too, going back to the line that it relates to earlier, is the bough that for, comma, but, comma, a moment sways. I've got basically the same line, but rhythmically, I've got here that bough which, comma, for a moment stays. So I have the phrase for a moment separated, a space in time for a moment, which relates back to that space of time, or it would have if I hadn't dumped the in. But it's just a little device that what looks kind of the same. It's comma for a moment, comma, stays, contrast against but, comma, a moment sways. So just technically, visually, sound-wise, if you're reading it directly and you're pausing slightly for the commas, it's just a little bit different, a little bit off, which suggests change too. To end, and it ends, and then there is life. And last line, and the mellifluous light of evening. So, I mean, line-wise here, we've got a lot of alliteration and assonance. The first line, uncaused moment that is this comma, the C's and the M's. Bow that for but a moment stays, the B, the B's and the T's. Bow, but, then we have that, but, moment. Then we have the last word sways, then relates the day, motion beyond the bars that the sonnet infers. So we have beyond the bars, the sonnet infers. So we have an internal rhyme there in that line, which is good. As the mellifluous light of morning, the L's, mellifluous, and M's, and the I's, the mellifluous light of morning, inters his eyes within the space of time. Without that joy, undeterred by this rhyme. Again, a lot of T's in that line. And the Y's too, without a joy rhyme, where he smiles in a way, just seeming, smiles, the S and M sound there, smile, seeming is good, to hint at a skull, which again, as far as I can tell, is really the only thing that suggests even violence here, which is really good. I went away from what would be expected. To hint at a skull, which only relates, so hint, relate, to his past, this poem, BP, find so distractive. I got a nice abruptive word in there, distractive, but yet you can toss that phrase out because it's got the two commas around it. Unlike that bow which for a moment stays, which I explained that line before, what it contrasts well against the line that it comments on. Within its rhythm or its beginning, the I's going crazy there, but it's setting a nice sort of systolic pace. To end, and it ends, and then there is life, and the mellifluous light of evening. So, I mean, that's it. Questions? We've done it.
Well, what does it mean? You know, I can go with the audience.
But seriously, is that? I mean, you know, I mean, so we've seen here, and what we started about an hour and 15 minutes, I'd say, about 70 minutes here. So it gives us a good almost 2.5 hours to do other stuff. But so there it is. I think I've explained why I chose the title. I think we had a good idea of why I chose certain words. And this is, I have to say, to pat myself on the back, I'm going to have to let this sit for a few hours. I don't know if this is a great sonnet, but I mean, it's, even if it's not a great sonnet and that it doesn't illuminate anything, technically it's damn good. That's one of the things that people have to realize is, if you wait for the moments of inspiration, you know, you're going to be waiting a long time. And so I just put here done. But you have to develop skill. You know, there are people that I know who have a lot of talent, awesome talent. They don't work at it. You have to work at it. And hopefully, in seeing some of the mindly processes here, you know, I went, you know, I had directions I was going, and then I scrapped them because it wasn't working. I had the Vermeer thing, but there's some abstraction here too. There are nice images, the mellifluous light of evening, and it's very classical. It's almost, you know, a mellifluous light of evening sounds like it could be from Shakespeare or a romantic poet, but yet it's about GEIN. So those are things that give it some gravitas. I don't know what more I could say. Do you have any?
What percentage of your poetry would you say is by divine inspiration?
Inspiration. If I see a beautiful woman, I can rip off on something. But usually most of these things here, if you see, I've got all kinds of ideas. It's usually, you know, sometimes it's not just one singular divine or inspired idea. It's the concatenation of, I mean, art is work. I mean, you know, it's an avocation in the sense that you can't make money for it, but it has to be your vocation. And so here's yet another chapter in this one. And so that notebook is done here. That's done. And you know, off the top of my head, I generally give things a score between 1 and 100. I would say this is probably in the low 90s. I'll have to read it. Technically, I think technically the skill overwhelms what's saying it at this point. But if I come back and look at it, because I've got my marble notebook that I'll transcribe it into at the end of the day here. You know, having 8 hours or so between time might give me time to come at it fresh again. Again, throughout the title, what's it about? You know, GEIN becoming. I mean, without the title, you know, that's it. Maybe someday we'll do another one. But that was probably about 75 minutes.